Now, the title of the talk is about whether CSS can expected eventually to be adequate for rendering math online. And actually, it said something about LaTeX profiles. LaTeX profiles are XML guises of LaTeX. Now this is not a LaTeX profile. This is what you're looking at is HTML rendered with static CSS. No MathJax, no JavaScript. It's well, my mouse is. Why isn't it? I guess I have to grab this thing. But this is math. This is MathML, HTML with MathML. Well, actually, just in case I happen to be running Firefox, I changed the name of the math tags to MAT instead of MATH in order to disable Firefox's or anybody else's native rendering of MathML, so that only the CSS that I've written to render this is working. So this is, as I said, HTML. This could not be a LaTeX profile because this is demonstrating, in particular, CSS Flexible Boxes. I began by scatter painting CSS Flexible Boxes with these pink and light blue backgrounds. And then I took some math and inserted it in boxes that I thought it would fit in. So this is just a game, a warm-up for the talk. So now I need to find my way to where I want to go. And I need a different tab. Not there. Where am I? Not there. Did I lose? I think I lost the tab somewhere along the way. So I'm going to have to type in a URL. No, pardon?
History.
3?
History.
History?
Up top, in your menu block left.
Yes.
No, but, well, maybe. Let's try this. No, that's not right. Let's do this. Oh, I know what we can do. Let's do this. All right. All right, so is that a good size? I guess I want it a little larger. Can you read it now? So MathJax has already demonstrated that HTML with CSS is adequate for rendering math. The problem there is that what MathJax does is customize to it's customized for local platforms, for browsers, for fonts. It does a very specific insight rendering of what it's looking at. So in particular, if you save an HTML file that's using MathJax, you'll get to see all that CSS, and that file is not going to be any good on a computer other than the computer where it was saved. Now, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to give this talk, because what could be done, CSS has always been used for HTML, and it's almost always also been used for styling XML. And LaTeX profiles are XML. So this is about work in progress. There are uncertainties. We're not really there yet. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's designer language for XML and for HTML. And I'm not an expert on CSS. Maybe somebody in the audience knows more about CSS than I do, in which case I would like to meet any such people. CSS is still under development, and I'm not an expert, but based on what I read online, I have the impression that in particular vertical alignment is sort of edgy in CSS at this time. And in fact, I think I saw some of the edginess happen in upgrading maybe this past Friday from Firefox 30 to Firefox 31. As long ago as about 2007, I've been working with LaTeX profiles since about 2001, and as long ago as 2007, I began to look at the question of using CSS to render those profiles, but at that time, there was nothing to show. These slides are an example of the subject of the talk. This is, you're looking at profiled LaTeX. You're looking at the XML guise of profiled LaTeX. So the generalized LaTeX source in the category of profiled LaTeX gets processed, it becomes XML, and the XML gets reprocessed a little bit. The original XML corresponds pretty closely to the LaTeX source itself. That is, section numbers are not filled in, cross-references are not developed. So there's massaging that happens before we get to the XML file that you're looking at here. The three fonts that are cooperating with me, when I started trying to do this for this talk, I had the idea that if I could get a single font working on at least two browsers, that would be good. So I think this is a new laptop, and I only have Google Chrome and Firefox on this laptop. But the three fonts, three nice fonts. By the way, this is Latin Modern, and whoa. There's also Zits, which is a derivative of the Stix font, and the same slides are available in Zits. And then there's GNU Free Font, which is also a development based on Computer Modern. I say also based on Computer Modern. Latin Modern is based on Computer Modern. These are all Unicode fonts. So this is the GNU Free Font's a little bit darker than the Latin Modern, but I like the Latin Modern. So we've seen the poster. So here's an example. This is a calculus handout from 1995. And I'll show you the Latin Modern. And now, if you look carefully, there is some edginess in the alignment. And more specifically, the edginess in the alignment comes up when I'm using flexible boxes, CSS Flexible Boxes. And one of the situations where that happens is with sums, integrals, and products. To have sums, integrals, and products, to get them to look right. So for example, all right, here's a line where trouble shows. This line where we have the integral of exponential minus t squared from minus infinity, this simple statement that because that's an even function, it's twice the integral from 0 to infinity. You know that you see the vertical alignment's not quite right. The two integrals, now when I say the integral, I'm talking about everything that's under the sweep of that integral sign. And this is a flexible box. The overall thing is a flexible row, and the integral is divided into the head, which consists of the integral sign, the upper and lower limits, and the body. And the whole thing is a flexible row, but the head, that is the integral sign with its upper and lower limits, is a flexible column. And so to get that to work, I'm using flexible boxes. I do not want to go for a table with that. And so trying to get the alignment within, I don't seem to be having a problem with the alignment inside of a given flexible box. It's when I try to get it aligned with other things. So the math display is CSS display type. And vertical align, CSS property called vertical align should function. But it seems not to understand what the alignment point on a flexible box is. But this is something we could hope would eventually, without making a special plea for math, because math is always on the wrong side of 80-20 decisions. This is something we could hope might eventually get resolved in the general development of CSS. One thing, if you go to the W3 website, you will find that there is an absolutely enormous amount of work on CSS that is going on. Probably a lot of it will not really see the light of day, but certainly some of it will. Enough for this example. I mentioned that I have 3 fonts working. The style sheets, aside from font family invocations, differ only in their handling of \√ which is a flexible box, overset and underset. These are AMS commands that overset replaces stackrel, the LaTeX command stackrel. These overset and underset are flexible columns, and the 8 math accents, I guess those are Lamport's 8 math accents. There are probably other math accents, but my profile doesn't deal with them. The 8 math accents are sort of special cases of overset, but not really. The 8 math accents are also handled as flexible columns. And again, so there's this common theme that trying to get the alignment right for flexible boxes is a bit of a headache, and this is... All right, handling of fractions. Fractions are currently being handled as CSS tables. It's not entirely satisfactory, but it's pretty good. I'll show you an example in a bit. But the fractions must be treated as if the original source is written as I've shown you here, \frac, double braces A and then double braces B. The point being that the outer braces correspond to something that has CSS display type table row, and the inner braces corresponding to something that has CSS display type table column. You need both. Well, as long as you're trying to fit the CSS table model, it would be much better if you had a CSS column model and dually a CSS row model, but you don't need it for a fraction. If you had a CSS column model, then you wouldn't have that issue. Of course, you don't write this in your LaTeX source. Some processor in the fills in that stuff. So the bar in the middle of a fraction is the collapsed common border for the bottom of the numerator and the top of the denominator. And because you're doing that collapsing, you need those to be the same width, and table rows will do that for you. On the other hand, if there was a stage where I was trying to pass these things off as just table cells without table rows, and then the borders didn't work. So, wanted a CSS model for columns. Nested parentheses. So, simple math display. Parentheses are being handled as border sides. CSS gives you border left and border right, and then recent CSS allows you to talk about border radius. And border radius gives you that curl at the end. And the nice thing about this is that these fit perfectly. Now, maybe you don't want them to grow that much. After all, it's not exactly what LaTeX would give you unless you intervene. Let's blow this up. Those parentheses all look the same size. I don't like that as well. It's a little bit too extreme, maybe the other way, but I don't like this so much at all. I think it's hard to see with, well, anyway.
Don't you like this?
I did like it.
I prefer something in between this and the other. All right, handling of parentheses. As I said, they're implemented as CSS borders using border radius. They're perfectly sized, and this is okay, that's the actual screenshot. I like the way that looks. There are lots of different sizes of parentheses, more than you would easily get using LaTeX. And I think in this, one might argue that the fractions are taking up too much height. And if that was reduced, then the sizes of the, because remember, the parentheses are border sizes, and CSS gets borders right.
So the fraction bars don't extend all the way to the end of the K.
Where? Which line are you talking about?
I mean, everywhere.
The second equation is
And then
Where my CSS doesn't, is the CS is probably thinking about the Roman box rather than the Latin box, whatever, rather than the italic box. That's my guess. It's good enough for government work. All right, here's some examples. Well, maybe, does that fit? Pretty much. So some of these examples come from the Mozilla so-called torture test for MathML. Well, I don't want to make it any smaller. Again, if you look in certain places, you'll see some aligned. By the way, there's way too much space there. I'm not quite sure. I haven't figured out what's going on. There's some in this. I think these math accents are riding. Are they riding high? Something's not quite aligned.
No, well, it's again,
They're not centered.
the italic nature, same thing.
Well, actually, that's not looking too bad. And, 5 years ago, I would not have thought that one could get this out of CSS. CSS Flexible Boxes. A few examples. In some sense, tensor fields and spectral sequences are easier than first-year calculus. I'm not having, well, this seems to be pretty well aligned. So for example, this is transpose inverse of a matrix. It uses the math tools command. Well, actually, it uses a command in this LaTeX profile called mscripts, which takes 5 arguments: base, upper left, lower right, upper right. So you go counterclockwise from upper left. That's mscript. But when it comes to LaTeX, it uses the prescripts command that's part of the math tools package. This is a tensor field and a spectral sequence. These are things that I would not have thought till flexible boxes came along. They all use flexible boxes. Again, with markings, most of them, they involve both rows and columns. So the flexible rows have blue outlines, horizontal outlines, and the flexible columns have red vertical outlines. And so my thought, one of my thoughts is, shouldn't LaTeX engines be taught to typeset profiled LaTeX with CSS? Good CS engine gives one fine control of margins, borders, and paddings. And as I said, I know relatively little about CSS. And I already said there's a large amount of CSS development underway at W3, which is one reason why I think we could choose to have optimism about this approach to online rendering of math. Now, why might we want this approach to online rendering of math? The reason is speed. Where this page. It responds instantly to resizing. By contrast, if I take rendering of MathML via native rendering in a browser that has native rendering, I guess the only one that I trust these days is Firefox. Okay, did you see that? You didn't see the delay. Okay, I'm going to downsize again. Now. And again. Okay, it takes time. MathJax has a lot of work. I mean, not MathJax. The native MathML renderer has a lot of work to do. Now, if I did that with MathJax, the resizing would go pretty well. However, okay, I'm going to click on this link now. Well, just one page. Now this is the issue. The time consumption is a very serious issue with MathJax. A 40-page, something that's equivalent to 40 pages of print is just going to take too long. I mean, 3 minutes maybe to load with MathJax. Maybe a minute and a half. It depends on your processor. But maybe a minute and a half with native MathML. So one reason to root for CSS, I think, is time. Now, by the way, one of the time constraints that I have with this setup is that I'm using web fonts, because how else do you ensure that your readers are going to see Latin Modern? Nobody has Latin Modern, except the people in this room. Well, I won't bore you with my CSS wish list. Are there questions?
Yeah, one of the problems with the CSS in Firefox is that Firefox has this vertical alignment bugs, which have been lying for.
Yeah, and we've been seeing it.
Yeah. And their implementation of inline block is also buggy. So there is instead of tables, you could use inline block. So
I use inline block quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
But actually, Firefox, Chrome, and Opera are pretty much on the same page with CSS these days.
No.
Vertical alignment is advertised to be edgy.
But Opera is slightly different because they have, these Firefox implements MathML natively, whereas Opera.
No, I'm not using MathML.
No, Firefox implements MathML natively in HTML5, but Opera decided to use CSS. So, because they were confident of their CSS implementation, which is slightly better than Firefox. So they went for CSS implementation in their browser. So maybe you could try this in Opera, maybe look slightly better.
I don't have Opera on this computer, but I have checked this with Opera, and it looks the same.
Looks the same.
Other questions?
What is a LaTeX profile? You mentioned that a lot.
That's what I talked about at the 32nd anniversary TUG meeting 4 years ago in San Francisco. It's in the TUG volume corresponding to that meeting, and there's also a video, thanks to Kaveh, that you could watch.
All right, well, thank you.